Imagine your 16-year-old sister is grieving your dead father, and your boyfriend of 3 years decides to publicly call her fat at the dinner table. Yeah, this woman dumped him on the car ride home, and we are going to break down exactly why he is absolute trash. The writer is 22 years old and genuinely thought she had found the one after dating this guy for 3 years. But sometimes the universe gives you a blindingly bright warning sign, and you just have to pay attention. 2 years ago, the writer and her younger half sister went through an absolute nightmare when their dad developed severe leukemia and passed away in just a couple of months. It was the hardest thing they ever had to face. Grief is a heavy, unpredictable monster, and the 16-year-old sister took the loss incredibly hard. She used to be super active and loved going to the gym, but she stopped all of that. She started leaning on junk food for comfort and ended up gaining a lot of weight. Fast forward to the present, and the writer and her boyfriend are over at the stepmother's house for lunch. They are all sitting around eating homemade pizza, trying to have a nice, normal family afternoon. The teenage sister casually asks her mom if she can have another slice. And out of nowhere, the boyfriend looks right at her and says, "Are you sure you want another one looking like that?" The poor girl immediately gets up from the table and runs to her room. The writer was in such total paralyzing shock that she froze. She could not even form the words to scream at him or follow her sister to check on her, which is something she deeply regrets. But the shock wore off fast. They do not live together, so the second they got in his car to leave, she told him it was permanently over. Now, this absolute clown of an ex-boyfriend is whining that she is overreacting and exaggerating the whole situation. Let us really put this under the microscope because the audacity here is staggering. Was the writer too harsh to throw away 3 years over one single sentence? Absolutely not. She actually acted like a boss. The only thing she is struggling with is the guilt of freezing up at the table, but that is a completely normal human trauma response. When someone you love and trust suddenly drops their mask and reveals a monster underneath, your brain literally short circuits. We are talking about a 24-year-old man. His frontal lobe is basically fully developed. He was there when the father died. He watched these girls cry. He knew exactly why her body had changed. So why did he do it? It is not about health or concern. It is about power and control. He wanted to assert dominance and humiliate a vulnerable teenager in a room where he was just a guest. And now, instead of feeling an ounce of shame, he is deploying classic manipulative tactics. He is trying to convince the writer that she is the crazy one for having basic boundaries. He is exactly the kind of guy who masks his cruelty as just being honest and refuses to understand why everyone hates his opinions. This whole disaster points to something so deeply toxic that almost everyone has experienced at some point. The weaponization of honesty to police women's bodies is an epidemic. People will deliver an absolute gut punch wrapped in fake concern, and when you bleed, they turn around and call you overly sensitive. It is an insidious form of control that teaches young girls their worth is completely reliant on how they look rather than who they are. If a grown man is willing to body shame a grieving teenager over a slice of pizza, think about how he would treat a partner who gets pregnant, experiences postpartum changes, or battles a serious illness. He showed a fundamental lack of human empathy. He believes his visual preferences are universal law, and the second you deviate from his standard, you are subjected to his cruel commentary. It is a terrifying glimpse into a future of constant, exhausting judgment. The internet did not hold back on this one. First, you have the absolute cynics trying to poke holes in the story. One user aggressively claimed the post must be artificial intelligence because 14-year-olds do not go to the gym, which is hilarious because, first of all, the original post clearly states the sister is 16, and second, teenagers absolutely work out all the time. But the overwhelming majority of the comment section completely validated the writer and turned into a heartbreaking, raw support group. This story unlocked a massive floodgate of shared generational trauma. One commenter remembered their own dad saying, "For a fat girl, you don't sweat much." A comment so devastating that they still remember the exact sting more than 50 years later. Another person recalled being just 10 years old when their father looked at them and said, "I get nauseous when I look at you." The psychological damage these offhand comments cause is permanent. Someone else shared a completely unhinged story where their mother put them on a diet and used hypnotism to make them believe bugs were crawling on their food, a trauma they still struggle with today. A 32-year-old man even chimed in to say his own father still calls him fat, proving that gender and age do not protect you from the deep, lingering pain of familial body shaming. The trauma these comments revealed is staggering. But then there was a really fascinating shift in the discourse. One user stepped up to apologize on behalf of all men, openly acknowledging that men need to be loud and clear in calling out this exact type of misogynistic garbage. The replies immediately rallied behind this, pointing out how vital it is for men to hold each other accountable in the rooms women are not in. Because the sad reality is, when a woman calls a man out for crap like this, she is met with complaints that females are always overreacting or that she just cannot take a joke. When men check other men, suddenly they feel the shame they actually deserve. And we absolutely have to mention the perfectly described the shock of hearing what came out of this guy's upper asshole, a phrase borrowed from an army buddy that is far too accurate to ignore. The verdict here is not even up for debate. The writer is an absolute champion. She proved her loyalty to her family in the ultimate way, showing her sister that she is a priority and that nobody gets away with belittling her. So here is the path forward. Do not accept any fake apologies, and absolutely do not let him weasel his way into contacting the sister. Send him out with scorched earth. Send him this exact text. You thought you could humiliate my grieving sister in her own home, and I would just smile and play along. You showed me exactly how ugly and empty you are on the inside. Lose my number permanently, and maybe spend some time figuring out why you get a thrill out of bullying teenage girls. And then hit block. You deserve someone with actual character. So what would you do if your partner dropped a comment like this at a family dinner? Would you have kicked him to the curb before the car ride was even over? Or would you have caused a scene right there at the table? Let me know down in the comments, and do not forget to hit that subscribe button for more insane relationship drama. A 25-year-old man slaps his cousin's brand new phone into a pool for a laugh, refuses to pay a single dime to fix it, and ends up getting 20% of his paychecks legally confiscated. Let us get into the absolute chaos of this family drama. The writer of our story is a 25-year-old woman who just treated herself to the absolute latest iPhone Pro model. Between the taxes and adding on Apple Care, she dropped about $1,300 on this device. She paid for it entirely by herself and had only been using it for a single week when the disaster struck. A couple of months ago, the whole extended family gathered at her grandmother's house for a birthday party. Everyone was hanging out in the backyard, socializing and relaxing around the swimming pool. The writer was just standing near one of the patio tables, completely minding her own business, taking photos of the family and sending some texts. Enter her 25-year-old male cousin. According to her, this guy has always fancied himself a bit of a comedian, heavily relying on physical humor and embarrassing pranks just to be the center of attention. He sneaks up behind her and starts aggressively teasing her about being glued to her phone. She rolled her eyes and gave him a very clear verbal warning to knock it off. Instead of backing down like a normal adult, he keeps hovering around her space, pretending to swipe at her hands. She tells him to stop again, very clearly and firmly. But this guy literally slaps the phone straight out of her hand. The brand new $1,300 device bounces once on the hard concrete and slides directly into the bottom of the deep end. They fish it out immediately, but it is completely dead and utterly unresponsive. Apple takes one look at it, declares it a victim of severe water damage, and says it is completely beyond repair. When she confronts the cousin, this grown man actually laughs right in her face. He claims he did not think it would actually go in the water, but the second she demands that he pay for a replacement, his entire attitude flips from amusement to defensive anger. Suddenly, it is just an innocent accident, and he shifts the blame directly onto her, claiming she should not have been standing so close to a pool with expensive electronics. She demands her $1,300, and he flat out refuses. And this is exactly where the family dynamic gets incredibly toxic. The relatives immediately form a protective shield around the cousin. They start guilt-tripping the writer, loudly pointing out that she makes way more money than he does, and reminding her that he has a girlfriend and a brand new baby to support. They call her petty for being mad over a simple mistake. But for the writer, it was not even about the cash anymore. It was the blatant disrespect. She told him to stop. He intentionally ignored her boundaries, and instead of a genuine apology, he gaslit her into thinking she was the problem. So, after weeks of him refusing to hand over a single dollar, she dragged him straight to small claims court. She won the case easily, but he still refused to pay, forcing her to officially file for wage garnishment. Now, 20% of every single paycheck he earns gets automatically siphoned into her bank account. And of course, the family is losing their minds, accusing her of destroying his life over a stupid piece of technology. But if we look closely at the logistics of this story, there is a massive, glaring plot hole that the internet immediately sniffed out. The writer explicitly stated she bought the latest iPhone Pro model. Modern iPhones have an IP68 rating, meaning they are incredibly water resistant and can easily survive being submerged in a pool for up to 30 minutes. Dropping it in for a few seconds should not have completely bricked the device unless that initial concrete bounce utterly shattered the casing. But even if it did completely shatter, there is a second major red flag. She specifically mentioned she purchased AppleCare. AppleCare covers accidental drops and severe water damage. With AppleCare, you do not pay $1,300 for a ruined phone. You pay a $99 deductible for a full hardware replacement. Why on earth is she taking him to small claims court for the full retail price if she literally bought the insurance? It absolutely does not add up, and many people called this out as a totally fabricated piece of fiction. But for the sake of the psychology here, let us analyze the villain of this narrative. Why does a 25-year-old father act like a hyperactive middle school bully? It reeks of deep-seated jealousy and massive insecurity. This cousin has a kid and a girlfriend he is visibly struggling to support. Meanwhile, his female cousin is financially independent, unburdened, and casually flexing a luxury item that costs more than his monthly rent. Slapping that phone out of her hand was not a clumsy mistake. It was a microaggression fueled by bitter resentment. He wanted to physically knock her down a peg because he felt deeply inadequate about his own life choices. This whole disaster exposes a much darker reality about family dynamics and the pervasive golden child syndrome. We see this constantly, enabling families demanding that the responsible, successful child act as a financial shock absorber for the family screw up. The entire family expected her to just eat the cost simply because she could afford it. They weaponize the concept of family loyalty when what they really mean is quiet compliance. It is a bizarre societal expectation, often tinged with heavy misogyny, where women are commanded to keep the peace and smooth things over. Instead of holding the destructive man-child accountable for his atrocious actions, the collective family unit turns on the victim because it is far easier to bully the responsible sibling than it is to actually parent the chaotic one. The family was totally fine with property damage, so long as it did not inconvenience the precious boy who cannot even regulate his own impulses around a swimming pool. Even with all this incredibly obvious bad behavior, some contrarians still love to victim blame. One commenter actually stepped into the ring and argued that a 50-50 financial split would have been more fair, aggressively asking why she had her phone out by the water and questioning if the cousin had a valid point about her being glued to her screen. The absolute audacity to suggest that simply existing near a body of water means you deserve to have your property assaulted is wild. But the rebuttal came in hot and completely decimated that logic. Another user pointed out the sheer hypocrisy of the family, stating that it is always called petty until it is there, $1,300 sitting at the bottom of a pool. Someone else delivered the ultimate truth bomb. Jokes instantly stop being jokes the second they cost someone $1,000. The cousin played a profoundly stupid game, and as a direct result, he won a court-ordered payment plan. The writer is an absolute legend for not backing down, even if the tech details of her story are a bit suspicious. She gave him the opportunity to apologize and set up a private payment arrangement, but he chose to dig his heels in and act completely untouchable. He forced her hand into the legal system, and the legal system did exactly what it was designed to do. If I were in her shoes, I would not just quietly collect the wage garnishment. I would draft a highly specific, scorched earth text message to drop directly into the main family group chat. Send him this. Hey, just wanted to let you know that the 20% missing from your paycheck is just a hilarious physical prank I am pulling on your bank account. I thought you loved jokes. Maybe next time you will respect a woman when she tells you no. Send it, put the chat on mute, and enjoy the absolute silence of a fully funded bank account. What would you guys do in this situation? Would you have just eaten the AppleCare deductible to keep the family peace? Or would you have dragged his clown behavior straight in front of a judge? Let me know down in the comments and hit that subscribe button for more deep dives into the wildest internet drama. Your girlfriend offers her dinner to a greedy friend, watches him inhale the entire plate, and then demands you buy her fast food on the ride home because she is starving. We are diving into an incredibly frustrating, germ-filled restaurant drama where absolutely nobody knows how to set a basic boundary, and everyone is expecting someone else to read their minds. The writer of today's story is dealing with a partner who has a bizarre and exhausting dining habit. Every single time they go out to eat, she feels a compulsive need to offer her food to everyone at the table. When the writer asked her why she feels the need to do this, she claimed it is simply how she was raised. She believes she has to ensure everyone else is fully taken care of before she allows herself to take a single bite. The writer has repeatedly tried to gently explain that while this might seem like an admirable gesture, it is completely unnecessary. And he has assured her that no one will judge her for not offering her food, mainly because everyone else at the table already ordered their own meals. But she refuses to stop. And it is not just about passing around a basket of fries or a shareable appetizer. She will literally offer bites of her main course, whether it is a burger, a plate of pasta, or even a bowl of soup. This inevitably results in other people taking direct bites of her food or stabbing their used saliva-covered forks directly into her meal. Aside from the undeniable grossness of swapping spit with a table full of people, there is a much bigger problem, and his name is Brian. The writer has specifically warned his girlfriend that she desperately needs to stop offering her meals when they dine out with this particular friend. Brian is the type of person who has absolutely no self-control when it comes to eating, paired with zero social awareness. He fundamentally does not understand that the phrase, help yourself, does not mean you can eat all of it and I will not mind. There have been multiple instances in the past where the group will order a shared appetizer plate and Brian will absolutely house 90% of it. Because the rest of the table is busy talking and trying to be polite, Brian just assumes their slow pace means they are not hungry, giving him the green light to inhale everything in sight. Um, to make matters infinitely worse, Brian is a financial liability. The writer admits that he would not care nearly as much about the food hoarding if Brian actually paid for what he consumed. But Brian is almost always broke and seems to have a profound misunderstanding of how sales tax and gratuity work. If a menu item is listed as $11.99, Brian will wait for the check, toss exactly $12 onto the table, and genuinely believe he has paid his fair share. The writer knows exactly how this sounds and begs the audience to understand that Brian is supposedly a really great guy and a reliable friend in other aspects of life. He claims Brian just has a troublesome relationship with food, and that is the only facet of his personality relevant to this disaster. The breaking point happened last night. The couple was out to dinner with a group of friends, including the infamous Brian. True to form, the girlfriend immediately offered her meal to everyone at the table. The writer did not want to make a massive scene in front of their friends, but he gave her a little nudge under the table as a warning. She simply shrugged him off and continued offering her plate. Unsurprisingly, Brian swooped in and ended up eating the vast majority of her food, on top of completely finishing his own plate. The girlfriend sat there and did not say a single word to stop him. The real audacity kicked in on the car ride home. The girlfriend casually asked if they could pull into a fast food drive-through because she did not get enough to eat at the restaurant. The writer completely snapped. He told her she should have just eaten the food she actually ordered instead of practically begging the table to take it from her. He reminded her that this was exactly why he warned her about Brian in the first place. She has seen firsthand how Brian acts around free food, so she had absolutely no right to act surprised when he ate way more than she was intending to share. The writer still stopped to buy her the fast food, but he loudly complained that he does not enjoy paying for Brian's meals by proxy, since Brian essentially ate the dinner the writer had just paid for. He admits he might have been a little harsh, but this exact scenario has played out multiple times, and she knows he hates it. Now, the girlfriend is incredibly upset, and they are locked in a standoff where both of them are expecting an apology from the other. If we put the writer under the microscope, his behavior is actually incredibly passive and contradictory. He claims Brian is a fantastic, reliable friend, but a reliable friend does not constantly stiff the server and force his buddies to cover his tax and tip on a $12 meal. The writer is acting like a helpless bystander to his own wallet being drained. He is deeply annoyed by Brian's gluttony and cheapness, but instead of confronting the grown man stealing food and money, he channels all his frustration onto his girlfriend. He is treating Brian's atrocious lack of manners as an unchangeable force of nature, while demanding his girlfriend change her core personality to accommodate the mooch. But we also have to analyze the girlfriend because her behavior goes way beyond simple generosity. It borders on a bizarre, self-sabotaging compulsion. She is willing to sacrifice her own dinner to the point of starvation just to fulfill this performative need to feed others. It is entirely possible this stems from a deeply ingrained cultural expectation, or even a trauma response from a household where she was not allowed to eat until everyone else was satisfied. One commenter even asked if she was simply uncomfortable eating in public, leading her to nibble and give her food away to hide an eating disorder. But the writer clarified that she eats perfectly fine if no one takes her up on the offer, and she even tries to force him to take bites when they have ordered the exact same meal. This proves it is a mindless, deeply ingrained habit. But offering your soup to a table full of adults is not polite, it is completely unhinged. This entire mess highlights a massive universal frustration with performative people pleasing and the sheer lack of hygiene in modern social settings. Passing a burger around a table of adults at an Applebee's is wild. As one commenter brilliantly pointed out, we just lived through a global health crisis, yet this woman is eagerly passing her utensils around like she is trying to single-handedly revive oral herpes and mono. If they are not at a family-style restaurant, the meal is not family style. The plates are hot, nobody is trading Pokemon cards, so everyone just needs to shut up and eat their own food. Beyond the hygiene, there is a profound financial disrespect happening here. It is incredibly easy to be the generous, nurturing provider when you are spending someone else's money. The writer is essentially funding a pop-up soup kitchen for his mooching friend. Think about it like a gift. If someone buys you a beautiful gift and you immediately start breaking it apart and handing the pieces to random people right in front of the person who bought it for you, that is incredibly rude and disrespectful. She is treating his hard-earned money as her own personal charity fund and then having the nerve to make him buy her a second dinner on the way home. We also have to talk about people like Brian, who weaponize polite society. There was a fascinating story buried in the comments about a relative who deliberately exploited polite people for sport. This relative would show up to a freezing winter hike with no coat, loudly complaining about the cold until a polite girl offered them her scarf. The relative kept pushing until the girl eventually handed over her coat, hat, and gloves. At the end of the walk, the relative just stared passive-aggressively, refusing to return the clothes unless explicitly asked, knowing the girl was simply too polite to demand them back. This is exactly what Brian is doing with the food. He has an awful ability to instantly sense a target that is too weak to defend their boundaries, and he will devour their food knowing they are too paralyzed by politeness to stop him. Brian is not just hungry, he is an opportunistic leech. The internet turned into an absolute battleground over who is really to blame here. A vocal group of commenters labeled the writer as the absolute villain for not defending his girlfriend. They argued that it only takes 2 seconds to look across the table and say, Jesus, Brian, she said to just try a bite. They tore into the writer for making every excuse under the sun for Brian's terrible relationship with food, while fiercely judging his girlfriend for not having her own food issues perfectly under control. They believe the writer is taking the easy way out by fighting with his submissive girlfriend rather than risking a confrontation with his greedy male friend. But the rebuttal to that argument was absolutely savage, and it completely dismantled the idea that the writer needs to be his girlfriend's savior. Countless people pointed out the blatant sexism and infantilization in expecting the man to speak for her. The girlfriend is a fully grown adult who offered her food completely unprompted. Why is everyone in the comments expecting the boyfriend to step in and act like the meal police? If she has the confidence to demand a second meal at a fast food drive-thru, she clearly has a voice, and she needs to learn how to use it at the actual dinner table. The writer specifically warned her not to do this. She completely ignored his advice, and she willingly handed her plate over to a human vacuum cleaner. Furthermore, even if the writer miraculously banished Brian to another dimension, the core problem still remains. She does this with everyone. She will constantly risk going hungry and constantly force the writer to buy her a second dinner because she refuses to conquer her own performative habit. As one user bluntly stated, it is a problem she willingly creates, and it is entirely on her to stop it. The writer is not her babysitter, and he should not have to spend his entire evening monitoring a grown woman's plate to ensure she gets enough calories to survive the car ride home. The final verdict is that absolutely everyone in this story is completely insufferable, but the writer is not wrong for putting his foot down. The girlfriend needs to build a shiny spine and stop acting like a medieval peasant offering a feast to the local lord. Brian needs to learn basic human decency and figure out how a calculator works when the bill arrives, and the writer needs to stop enabling both of these people. Here is the exact, non-negotiable text message the writer needs to send to his girlfriend right now to shut this down permanently. I love you, but I am officially retiring as your backup food sponsor. If you want to offer your meals to the entire restaurant, that is your choice. But from now on, you will be paying for your own dinner and your own fast food on the ride home. Also, I am no longer splitting checks with Brian. We are getting separate bills from now on. Send that text, completely drop the argument, and let her experience the actual financial consequences of her own boundless generosity. So, what would you do if your partner constantly handed their expensive dinner to a greedy friend and then demanded you buy them a burger on the way home? Would you cut them off financially, or would you cause an absolute scene at the restaurant and rip the plate right out of the friend's hands? Let me know down in the comments, and make sure you hit that subscribe button for more deep dives into the wildest relationship drama on the internet.